Have you ever looked at a game you used to play as a child and get all of those memories flooding back all at once? Well, for me, that game was Mario Kart Wii. I would play that game for hours as a kid, racing all the tracks and trying to unlock all the secret characters and karts. But that game was released almost 20 years ago, so since then, have games actually improved? Well, technically, yes, but they still don't feel the same as before. And no, I don't think it's just growing up or getting older. It can't just be me who finds it strange that games with tiny memory and simple graphics feel more rewarding than some of today's biggest releases. In this video, I want to look at how developers' constraints force them to master game design, creating timeless classics modern studios now struggle to replicate. To understand why, we have to go back to the trenches of early game development. Modern developers have access to almost unimaginable resources now, but in the 8-bit and 16-bit eras, they faced brutal constraints, which forced them to be creative in ways not previously thought. Take the NES for example. Its CPU ran at a measly 1.7 MHz, and it had just 2 kilobytes of RAM. For comparison, a single high-res texture file in a modern game can be thousands of times larger than an entire game on that system. The NES could also only show 25 colours on screen at once, from a palette of about 54. Sprites had a fixed size, a handful of colours, and only 8 could be displayed on the screen at once before it would start to flicker and glitch out. With such technical restraints, there was no room for filler, no space for bloat. Developers couldn't lean on jaw-dropping visuals or cinematic cutscenes to carry the experience. Their only tool was pure, focused game design. I feel like this perfectly showcases the scale of the constraints these developers were working under during the 80s and early 90s. But did they give up? No. They couldn't just brute force problems or throw more money at them. They had to outsmart the machine. And this is where the magic really happened. Instead of quitting, developers turned these limitations into strengths, creating game design principles that carried some of the greatest retro titles to success. Let's take Super Metroid for example. How did a game on the SNES build a huge, interconnected alien world on a tiny cartridge? Not with sheer size and bloat, but with brilliant design. The world of Zebus is a masterclass in non-linear exploration. Different regions have distinct themes, broken into smaller biomes to feel more real and less like a checklist of the lava area, the ice level, etc. The game guides you subtly, locking and unlocking paths as you get new abilities, creating a great pace as the player progresses. But it also trusts you. Optional upgrades and hidden paths are everywhere, rewarding players who pay attention. The world feels enormous, not because it's 1,000 miles wide, but because it's dense, mysterious, and packed with secrets. And more importantly, it doesn't hold your hand the whole way through. It trusts you as the player to explore the world. It uses its constraints to create a feeling of loneliness as you explore, something a massive open map could never do. In games, this technique is referred to as the illusion of scale, making players feel like they are exploring a massive world that in reality is not that big at all, especially compared to modern standards. But with such small budgets, how did companies create the identifiable mascots we all know today? Take Mario for example. Why is he one of the most recognizable characters on the planet? It's a direct result of solving technical problems. When Shigeru Miyamoto designed him for Donkey Kong, he was working with the tiny grid of pixels. The problem he had was, how do you make a character instantly readable on a low-res screen? Well, the answer he came up with is genius, and explains a lot of how the character came to be today. You give him a hat, because animating hair at the time was too challenging, a mustache to define his nose from his face, and overalls to make his arm movements visible against his body. Every choice was a clever solution to a problem. What seemed at the time like a compromise turned out to be an icon. The simplicity of sprites forced artists to master visual communication, creating bold designs that conveyed characters and functions in an instant. This iconography of instantly recognizable characters is why Mario is one of the most famous gaming characters ever created. Another ingenious technique used was what is referred to today as headcanon. Think about the original Legend of Zelda. The game gives you almost no direction. It drops you in a world, hands you a sword, and trusts you to figure it out. Miyamoto was inspired by his childhood memories of exploring forests and caves, and he wanted to give players that same sense of discovery. The game's manual even came with maps and hints, acknowledging that you might get lost, but framing it as part of the adventure. Because the graphics were so simple, your imagination did the heavy lifting. That blocky tree wasn't just pixels, it was part of a deep, mysterious forest. The dark cave held unknown dangers. The game provided a framework, a miniature garden, as Miyamoto called it, and you, the player, filled in the blanks with your own imagination. The experience became deeply personal because you were an active participant in creating the world around you. In turn, this creates way more emotion in the player when compared to a modern title that lays out all the rules for you. So what happened? If these principles are so powerful, why do so many modern games not use them anymore? The problem isn't the technology, it's the philosophy. Retro games couldn't afford to waste your time, as the gaming industry was nowhere near the size or had the same interest to the investors as it does today. To put it into context, in 1986, when the original Legend of Zelda came out, the gaming industry was worth $15 billion globally. By contrast, in 2025, the gaming industry is valued at over $180 billion. Modern titles are now backed by grossly insane budgets and massive disconnected teams in different studios across the world, making modern releases feel more corporate than something made with passion by a small team of developers. We've seen the shift occur where the age of constraints has been replaced by an age of excess. Massive budgets means less incentive to take risks for these companies. Publishers want a guaranteed return on investment, which often leads to more sequels, less risk taking, and more of a focus on player attention over satisfaction. This creates games that feel like checklists. Yes, I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. Which is turning gameplay into a to-do list, instead of a story told through the player's eyes, like Metroid and The Legend of Zelda did back on the NES. This is not only a waste of time, but a disservice to the people spending their hard-earned money on them. There's a common sentiment in the gaming community that says modern gaming is more expensive than in the retro eras of the NES. But this is simply not true. Well, not on the face of it anyway. During the height of the NES, most games retailed for around $35 to $50, with big releases sometimes pushing closer to $60. Adjusted for inflation, that means many of those cartridges would cost roughly $90 to $120 in today's money. By comparison, modern AAA titles on the PlayStation 5 typically launch around $60 to $70. So despite the common belief that gaming is more expensive now, the reality is that the new $70 releases are actually cheaper in real terms than a $50 game was in 1990. However, there's a big caveat to this, which is that I would argue, even though these games today are cheaper, they are far less of a complete package and far more monetized. Whether it be through cosmetics, microtransactions, season passes or subscriptions, the cost of a modern game today rarely ends once you have the disc in hand and left the store. Where once older games trusted you to learn, many modern titles are terrified you might get confused and quit. They begin with what feels like hours of unskippable cutscenes and tutorials that hold your hand from start to finish. Instead of letting you discover mechanics organically through gameplay, they bombard you with intrusive pop-ups and text boxes, constantly telling you what to do and guiding you where to go. The mystery that Zelda championed is now gone, replaced with the monotony of following a glowing marker on a minimap. The joy of that aha moment you used to get in games like Mario and Zelda after completing a puzzle are now sacrificed for fear that the player might feel lost or confused. Part of the blame for this shift can be put on the transition to online live service content, as opposed to the single player experiences back in the 80s and 90s. The difference is also in philosophy, like I previously mentioned. Back on the NES, developers asked one question: is this fun? Simple and effective, and really the only question that should be asked when making any video game. This philosophy is what should be at the heart of every game, because at the end of the day, gaming is about fun. It's about sharing that fun with friends and family. It's about coming home after a stressful day at work or school and losing yourself in a world for hours. Gaming shouldn't be a chore or feel like a task. They should bring escapism from a reality that isn't always sunshine and rainbows. This is what Miyamoto gave us with Mario and Donkey Kong. Live service games today, however, do not focus on this. They focus more on data and how much playtime they can possibly squeeze out of a player, and in turn money through microtransactions. The over-monetization of the gaming industry is slowly killing the creativity and passion that used to exist in it. In my time, I have played my fair share of competitive shooters. Titanfall 2 used to be my game back in the day. However, I have witnessed firsthand that rage when getting killed by the same guy on the enemy team for the 10th time in a row. And no, hold on to your just get better comments. Yes, I can see you. But I feel like these types of games leave me more stressed than before. And I feel like these type of competitive games are what are dominating most of the games coming out today. And this isn't what gaming should be. Now, hold on, I'm not saying that every game should be like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley. Absolutely not. But gaming should be a release and an escape. Not a digital gambling site like Fortnite or almost any EA release nowadays. And this isn't an issue that's only affecting the gaming industry. We're seeing a similar trend with movies and TV, with constant sequel baiting and a general lack of creativity in an industry where creativity should be at the center.
Just do it!
So, if modern gaming has drifted so far from what made it special, is there any way back to what made it so great? Well, I think there is, because the truth is, those old game design principles never disappeared, they just moved somewhere else. While the massive AAA studios are busy chasing profits, a different part of the industry has been bringing the soul of gaming back. You guessed it, it's indie developers. Games like Hollow Knight, Undertale and Stardew Valley became massive successes, not because they were technically impressive, although I do want to say that some of these indie games are just as technically impressive as some of the biggest games coming from AAA studios at the moment. Players don't remember the graphics or levels, they remember emotions and stories. They remember how a game made them feel, the tension of exploring somewhere new, the excitement of discovering a hidden secret, and the satisfaction of finally mastering a difficult challenge, like all the way back on the NES with the original Mario Bros. These games succeeded because they trust the player again, they respect your intelligence, they allow mystery to exist, and when you look at the popularity of these titles, it proves something really important. Players haven't changed. Gamers didn't suddenly stop liking good game design. It was just pushed so far to the side in hopes of you forgetting it. Gaming isn't controlled by one company or studio. It's a medium, and like any medium, it evolves through the people who create it and the people who support it. That's why recently we've been seeing a huge resurgence in the popularity of indie games. So if you take anything from this video, let it be this. Go and check out a new small game from a small, lesser known developer. Because even though it may not have the best graphics or the smoothest gameplay, I can promise you one thing, and that's that it was made with pure passion for the tools that made gaming great. But with that being said, what games did you love from your childhood? Let me know down below in the comments, and check out this video on screen right now. I'll also leave some links to where you can check out some indie games below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.